Hello, welcome to Runday Sunday. Hope you are all having a nice, comfortable morning. Hope the weather is good, or at least something that you can enjoy. And speaking of enjoyment, the topic for today is to make running more enjoyable. Uh, I'm talking about easing into running. And so, what I mean by that is, I would like to address especially a lot of the newer runners out there, or people who don't like running, who are uncomfortable with it. And I would like to tell you, hey, I understand. I love running, but a lot of the time that I've been running has been frustrating and painful. And it's very easy to not want to run. There are a lot of people out there that share the same sentiment. And hopefully today will help you a little bit with that mindset. So, a lot of people, I think, get into running, right? Or they think they want to run, or they think it's, something they got to do for their health, but they don't know how to get into it, and they find it painful and bad. It sucks, right? And yes, it does. So what happens is, at least for a lot of people that I talk to, and for me, is when you think about running, you think about professional runners, you think of sprinters, you think of when you had to do the 1 mile run in PE and how fast that went. And the truth is, most running, especially if you get into longer distance running, is a lot slower than you think, right? It's more of a jog in a way. And guess what? Don't worry, that is still running. You may not think so right now, but trust me, most of the time that I spend running now is not what I would used to consider running back in the day, but I very much do now, and I am a better runner overall for it. So, if you want to run above a mile, you have to accept, first off, that you're going to have to slow down, right? If your peak, time for a 1 mile run is, let's just be crazy here, 5 minutes. I've never even done that. But let's say you are able to run 1 mile in 5 minutes. Congratulations. Guess what? You are not going to be able to do that for the next, 4 miles, right? If your fastest 1 mile time is 5 minutes, your fastest 5 mile time is not going to be 25 minutes. It doesn't work that way. You're going to tire out, you're going to slow down, unless, a 5 minute mile is actually not your peak capacity. It means you can go faster. So, anyways, let's talk about people who actually have more realistic running times than 5 minute miles. I don't think new runners are going to be experiencing that, probably. So, if you want to get into running more, take it easy. So, you got to ease into it. And I mean that in both the long term and short term way. Let's start with the long term first. If you have only ever run, let's say, 1 mile, you are not going to know how it feels to translate your runs into 3, 5, 13, 20 miles, right? You're thinking, okay, well, I just do it multiple times, right? A 3 miler is just doing a 1 mile 3 times. And mathematically, that's true, but how you feel about that run is not going to hold up the same. So, for example, just doing a more extreme case, a commonly expressed obstacle that people run into is called the wall. And for a lot of people, they encounter it at around mile 17, which is kind of a weird thing to talk about, right? 17 seems like an arbitrary number. But at least for me, I've encountered that wall many times at around mile 17. And I guess that's typically, around, you know, 2+ hours. And it's typically when your body runs out of, enough carbohydrates to be fueling your run. And the way your body processes nutrients starts to get a little wonky, right? And so your body starts to shut down. So, what I mean by this, though, is simply that if you've never run these distances, you don't know the different feelings and obstacles you're going to have. And the thing is, not every run is the same. So, someone who runs 17 miles, it's not going to be the same challenges every time. Some days it's going to be a little easier getting up to that 17-mile mark. Some days you're going to struggle way before the 17-mile mark. And you won't know the different kind of runs you're going to have until you actually do them. So when you approach these different distances, you don't want to be going full tilt, because if it's going to be a struggle, by going into it full tilt, you're just making the struggle even worse, right? If I'm going all out on something and it's going to be a struggle, right? I don't see it coming. I'm going to run smack into that wall full speed, and it's going to hurt. And that's not going to encourage me to come back to running, right? So ease into these different distances at a slower pace than maybe you might think you can do it. And that way, when you are able to achieve these distances, it's going to be a little more comfortable. And so the growing pains will be a little less painful. So go from 1 mile to 3 miles, or whatever it may be, to 5 miles, 8 miles. And each time you push that boundary a little further, try doing it a little slower than you would like. It'll help the process as you build up this experience. Once you're more experienced, you know how it goes, you know how much leeway you have, you can push it faster then. Okay, so that is the long term easing into things. The short term of easing into things is, let's say you have experience going to a 5 mile run. A lot of the times the beginning is really tough, and if you push it too hard, it just sucks the whole way through. So if you think about it, right? If I'm doing a 5 mile run and I'm doing my first mile, the first mile a lot of times is tough because guess what? My body is starting from a standstill, right? Especially if I haven't warmed up all that much. Um, my body is not breathing and pumping blood and, it doesn't have all these mechanisms going ready for whatever pace I'm going to have in mind, right? It's, my heart is pumping ready for me being at rest, right? Like how I'm sitting right now. So you got to give it time to work its way up. And the way to think about it, especially if you have biked before, if you've ever biked with your gears at the absolute highest gear, so the highest resistance, it's not going to work very well, right? You have your bike stationary and you set it all the way up to, let's say, 3.7, right? 3 on the big gear, 7 on the little ones. It's really hard to get going. It's very painful. So what you want to do usually, right, is you start it at a lower gear. So let's say, I don't know, 2.5, and you find yourself, hey, it's pretty easy to, get it going. And then once you've maxed out at the speed that you can get for a 2.5 on flat ground, right, at some point it's going to get harder to speed up. You're pedaling as fast as you can. But the good thing is, right, you're pedaling as fast as you can and it feels smooth and easy. At that point, you can up the gears, right? The relative amount of extra effort you got to give into overcoming that resistance is pretty negligible at that point, right? If I'm already comfortable pedaling at 2.5, switching up my gears to 2.7 is okay. And then once I get used to that, I can go into the threes, that's fine. But if I start right from the get-go at 3.7, I'm not going to get anywhere. It's going to be a real painful process to get it going. So think about this in terms of your body, right? Your body is the bike. You do not want to go into a run going at full tilt. So if, let's say, you want most of your 5 mile run to be at, let's say, just for the sake of nice even numbers, 10-minute pace, you don't want to go from 0 to 10-minute pace right away. What you want to do is start somewhere comfortable, 13, 12-minute pace. I don't know. You got to figure out for yourself what is a comfortable way to start it, right? A nice little jog where you're breathing okay. Obviously, there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but you're still able to breathe fairly okay, right? And then as breathing gets more and more okay, you can push it a little more, right? 13-minute pace, 12-minute pace, 11-minute pace. And you take however long you need to adjust. Some days it's going to be all within the context of that first mile, right? At the beginning, you're running at 13-minute pace. By the end of that first mile, you're comfortable running 10-minute pace. Fine. Other days, it's going to suck and it will take you the absolute full 5 miles to make that adjustment. You won't even be able to run 10-minute pace until the very, very end, right when you get home or wherever the end of that run is. That's okay. So you gotta, again, this is another thing that takes experience to build, and it is another thing that will change, right, from run to run. But you have to go into this sort of thing with a sort of ease, step by step easing into process. So again, especially for the new runners out there, long term and short term, you got to give yourself a little bit of leeway. Got to, enjoy the process of building into pushing yourself harder, faster, farther. Yeah, enjoy the process. Ease into it. Okay, well, thank you for listening to this, and I hope you ease into your Sunday and get a little bit of enjoyment, whether you run or not. All right, peace.